This is Starting Point, a podcast that tracks Guyana's unprecedented growth from all vantage points. Join your hosts, Kiana Wilberg and Fariza Hanif, as they dive deep into the heart of topical issues.
Welcome to Starting Point, the Oil and Gas Edition. I am your host, Kiana Wilberg. Today we place the spotlight on Guyana's local content achievements, and what better person to help us flesh through some of these important issues will be the newly appointed head of the Local Content Secretariat, Mr. Michael Munroe. Mr. Munroe, welcome to the podcast.
Kiana, thank you for having me. It's always a pleasure to be here, and it's always a pleasure to advance the conversation of local content. So, again, I appreciate you having me here, and I look forward to fruitful discussions today.
Thank you. And first off, before I jump into my substantive questions, I want to congratulate you on your appointment. I know that there are going to be some heavy expectations because there's a lot to be done in the next 5 years. So, all the best on this road ahead for you. Now, at the Local Content Secretariat, you served as the legal officer for quite some time. How did you see Guyana's local content journey evolve through that lens?
So, Kiana, thanks for that question. I think from the enactment of Guyana's Local Content Act, we've moved tremendously. We've moved from feet to feet. One of the greatest achievements that we've had is we've encouraged a change in culture. So I think more than ever now, we have companies that are their disposition to treating with local content has had a tectonic shift. So no longer are companies going about their business without having due regard for locals. They're focused on, are these companies local content certified? Are these companies advancing the mandate of the Local Content Act? So I think one of the main things that we were able to achieve is that we were able to have the sector buy in to this story of local content. Because as you would appreciate, in many countries, you have oil and gas industries where the locals don't necessarily play a part.
Indeed.
So I think Guyanese should be extremely proud that we have a government that took the step to install a legal instrument, that is the Local Content Act, that more or less compels the players within the industry to think local content. And that was a great achievement because prior to act's enactment, there were various fear mongering happening, where we were told that, with the enactment of the act, we might slow down the operation of the industry.
Yes.
And I'm happy to say that today we can clearly see that the industry is striving, and we're striving with the participation of local persons. So I think that's a tremendous achievement that our local content story tells, that Guyanese can participate and Guyanese can meaningfully contribute to this success story that is characterized by our oil and gas industry.
I want to drill down a bit to that point you made where there was some degree of fear mongering, because I remember covering the consultation and there was, pushback.
Yeah.
To say that, the production sharing agreement, for example, stipulates already that there are some local content requirements that have to be met. And so it may be redundant to bring a law in place. But I really want you to explain for our audience the extent to which the law really advanced the requirements. It really took us past what the production sharing agreement stipulates.
So the act was critical in that it expanded and it clearly articulated a framework for the implementation of local content. I think the petroleum agreement as it stands, its provisions were not as expansive. There wasn't a clear framework on how we will treat with locals, from the concept of when they sign a production license, how do we provide the necessary information to locals so that they can have an understanding of what opportunities exist and how they can participate in that. How do we also compel these companies to meet certain targets on a year-on-year basis? So the act was instrumental in that. One, it created a schedule where you have 40 sectors where the government thought at the time that Guyanese had existing capacity, and the government would have, through those same consultations, determined varying percentages. So it required that these companies, in their yearly spend, must seek to achieve the levels of targets that the first schedule would have identified. And that has been tremendous in ensuring that these companies, local companies, first of all, participate, but second of all, grow through the continuous year-on-year procurement of their services in these 40 areas. It also allowed for the companies to now create what we call a local content master plan, and that is triggered on varying occasions. For example, every time one of the companies, well, in the main case, the Starbrook Block Co-Ventures, every time they sign a production license, they have to create a 5-year master plan for how they foresee the next 5 years will be in terms of procurement activities, in terms of employment opportunities, in terms of local content development. So,
And you know, Mr. Munroe, I want to just pause there for a moment, because even as you are explaining that the law has taken us beyond accepting the bare minimum
correct.
on local content, what I'm also hearing you state is that the law has given us that leeway to say for each project, each FPSO that comes on board, we are going to harness more benefits for Guyanese. And I think that's an important point that you're bringing out there, because there is some bit of a misinformation that Guyana is allowing FPSO after FPSO to pass us by without taking additional benefits.
I think it's unfortunate that persons fall victim to that kind of rhetoric, because I think the language is clear in the Act as it stipulates the circumstances under which the operators or the contractors, as we put it, must create this master plan. And going beyond that, even I think your viewers would appreciate that the government is in the process of concluding a bid round, a recent bid round. And those companies as well, on the signature or the execution of the petroleum exploration license that they will be granted, they too now have to create local content master plans, and they too now would have to prepare annual plans for which they have to implement. So I think the story ahead of us is very exciting, because we have now new entrants coming into the market, new entrants having to comply with the Local Content Act. So there will be bountiful opportunities within our local space for local companies to participate.
So let's say it a little bit louder for the people in the back. Now, what I'm getting from you, and I want you to let me know if I get this very clearly. In addition to the local content benefits that we're getting from each FPSO within the Starbrook block, there are more local content benefits to come from the PSAs, the new PSAs that the government will close with those companies from our first bid round.
So
that's interesting.
That's precisely what will happen and what the Local Content Act stipulates and requires. So a contractor, if you look at the definition of a contractor, is any person who has or signs a petroleum agreement with the government. So a petroleum agreement would be the PSA, and these new entrants, they will be signing this agreement. So they too now have to comply with the obligations. So I say this to say that, I mean, we were looking at the level of procurement activity that we would have had for the last 4 years, thereabout, on the basis of just one producing block and the other companies that existed within the other blocks. But now we are expanding the entrance or the participants in the Guyana Basin, and they too now have to comply with this act. So they too have to do accommodation, they too have to do transportation. Every single sector that is listed in the first schedule, they too will now have to comply with the obligation. So there is tremendous opportunity for local companies currently participating to expand and grow their businesses, but more so allow other Guyanese who might have an interest to explore the opportunities to see how can I be a part of Guyana's petroleum story? How can I be a part of Guyana's local content story? And that is what the act was created for, to incentivize Guyanese to participate. Because as I said previously, in many producing countries around the world, you would find these oil companies come to the country, they come to exploit the country's patrimony, and unfortunately, sometimes you find that the citizens don't get to meaningfully participate in that story. So they're more or less by the wayside looking on to see how that story unraveled. So Guyana's story is different in that the Local Content Act is saying, Guyanese, you now have a role to play. And the companies who are coming to exploit our patrimony, they must partner, collaborate with these companies by giving them opportunities to participate in these areas. So I think we are a model to some extent, because not many countries would go to the level of enacting a law. So we moved past just rhetoric or maybe doing a policy. We legitimized this process by having the National Assembly go through the legislative process, and the end product was the Local Content Act.
Now, I know that we have been talking about this first schedule. And so, for members of our audience who are not familiar with this term, can you break that down for them, please? And also explain, well, how companies have been able to, like, how does it work? What is the first schedule? How does it work? And how are contractors expected to utilize that first schedule?
Okay, fair enough. So the act stipulates that it places an obligation on the contractors and subcontractors to meet the local content minimum requirements. And what does that mean? There is a local content schedule within the first schedule that identifies 40 sectors. So it stipulates, for example, if these companies are engaged in petroleum operations locally, obviously they need accommodation.
Okay.
So it stipulates that, for example, with accommodation, they have to meet the minimum local content requirement as it relates to accommodation in the first schedule. And that percentage that, as stipulated, the totality of their spend relative to accommodation on a yearly basis, they need to procure, let's say it's 90%, they need to procure 90% of their spending on accommodation on a yearly basis must go to companies that are registered either as a Guyanese company or a Guyanese national, more or less. Because some Guyanese don't necessarily constitute their businesses as companies. They would rather go through the process either as an individual, or they might do a business registration with the Deeds and Commercial Registry. So the act is saying that these persons or these vendors in the local parlance that are providing accommodation, you need to comply with these levels. So I think, to put it mildly, we are seeing now that the companies no longer can look elsewhere. They need to look to see first, if they're engaged in any of the procurement opportunities on the first schedule, they first need to understand what the requirement is for their spend on a yearly basis. And then secondly, they need to look on the local content register to see who are the persons providing these services. And then once they procure from those persons, it would go towards their compliance percentage for the yearly basis. So there is real incentive, and I would always encourage Guyanese to, if you want to get into the oil and gas business, if you want to provide us a good or a service, get registered. So come down to the local content secretariat, understand what the requirements are, and once you get on that register, you have a more exposure to allow you to participate in this story. And that also allows me to segue to, we've also created a local content app.
Right.
So now, whereas previously perhaps you might have had to look on each company's page, or you might maybe look at the Center of Local Business Development, you would have to more or less look in a more protracted way at the different opportunities that existed. What the Local Content Act does is that it centralizes these opportunities. So once you download the app, all the companies have subscribed to the need to provide whatever procurement opportunities they have. They would post it via this app. So a Guyanese would now, once you have the app, you check, there's notifications that come, and you have in real-time basis as the company provides an RFI or RFQ. You have real-time information so that you could align yourself to meaningfully participate in these opportunities. So there's so much opportunities that exist, and I would wish that persons become more alive to the role that they can play in Guyana's petroleum story, and local content is the avenue through which you can get you could more or less leave your mark on the page as we move this story forward.
Now, we spoke about the first schedule and the number of areas that Guyanese can participate, and companies are supposed to give us first preference. Now, how has this performed in terms of numbers? How much money has it been able to trap in country for Guyanese companies as well as individuals?
Okay, so again, so just in these 40 areas, over the I think we're in our 4th year of implementing the Local Content Act. We have already garnered in excess of 1.6 billion United States dollars. So in the first year, and it has been on a year-on-year basis increasing. So in the first year, we would have seen Guyanese, the companies registered as local content certified, they would have gathered, I think, for in excess of 440 million US dollars.
Okay.
In the second year, we more or less went to 540 million US dollars. Then in the third year, we went to 704 million US dollars. This year, from January to June, I think we're just about 350 something million US dollars. And when you reconcile that with the year-to-date numbers for last year, it was around 316 million US. So we're seeing increases year on year. Every half year, we are seeing increases in the level of procurement activity. And if we're to gauge based on the numbers that we had last year and based on where we are currently for this year, I anticipate that there will be ramping up in the procurement activity, and we may more than likely, if the trend holds true, we will exceed last year's numbers. So we will be north of 704 million. Now, I'm sure, and I anticipate you might ask me about the
ExxonMobil's numbers, yes.
Yeah. So I anticipated that Exxon would have posted their numbers, and I think that is in excess of 400 and something million.
They said that they spent about 419 million at half year on Guyanese.
So and if you recall my numbers, which would be 350 something million, there is a delta of around 50 to 60 million. The reason for this, which I think your viewers must appreciate, is that our numbers are confined to the 40 areas in the first schedule. Okay. So what we report on is the amount of spend that is confined to the 40 areas on the schedule. Exxon, on the other hand, their reporting mechanism is a bit at variance in the sense that they are not limited
Oh,
they're
okay.
reporting to those areas within the first schedule.
Okay.
So their numbers might appear at variance with us, but it's because they're reporting beyond the 40 areas in the first schedule. So I want your viewers to appreciate that if you see reporting from us and the numbers are a bit varied from the reporting from other companies, not Exxon only, but the reason for that might be that they're not reporting solely on the 40 areas confined to the first schedule. But that is a good thing, in my opinion, because it suggests that the companies are procuring beyond the first schedule. And that is the point I was trying to make earlier, that since the enactment of the act, we have had a change in culture. These companies now want to be a part of Guyana's local content story, and in so doing, they are procuring from local companies beyond the first schedule. So they are anticipating that in the event that the government says tomorrow that it would expand the schedule to include these areas, they're already in the process of procuring from persons in Guyanese companies and Guyanese in these areas. So I think it's a good indication for us to feel proud that the act is stimulating procurement beyond the first schedule. And it is encouraging to see that the companies, which we must commend them as well, the companies are not saying, because there is a first schedule, we will limit ourselves to the first schedule. The companies are saying, hey, thank you for the first schedule, but we are willing to go beyond that. And that we must commend those companies in doing. And also, it gives the government a window into what are some of the areas perhaps we could look at in terms of expanding the schedule, so
Right,
that,
because
because
that
we know,
discussion is coming up
correct,
too.
it is coming up. It's a live issue, and that signals to us that there's existing capacities in these areas, and it would inform us in determining the requisite percentages to allocate to these areas. So I think it's a good thing. And what I again would say in sum is that year on year, the local content story is producing tangible benefits to Guyanese and Guyanese companies that are registered with the Local Content Secretariat. And this, I anticipate, story will continue to progress over the years. So we've seen year on year increases, and I only anticipate that with the continuous collaboration, the continuous registration of Guyanese companies, and the continuous buy-in from the industry, that we will continue to have increased participation and increased spending locally.
Now, there are just two other issues I want to touch on before we close. And we spoke about the importance of updating. We touched or alluded to the window of opportunity to update the first schedule based on what the companies are doing. But what are some of the other issues, if you can just touch on two, at least, that the Local Content Secretariat will look to improve upon or strengthen in this review process?
So we recently had the Local Content Summit, and at that summit, I alluded to some of the challenges that we had in terms of fronting. And as you would appreciate, with the enactment of the Local Content Act, it placed a premium on being Guyanese. So you would find that persons want to participate in the story, and in that participation, you're incentivizing Guyanese to be a part of this story, but at the same time, we're encouraging participation or collaboration or partnership with non-Guyanese. So what we have found is that Guyanese will use their citizenship as a means of saying to us that, hey, this company is owned by a Guyanese, but the way the company is structured, the Guyanese don't necessarily get the true benefits that the act contemplates, because again, Local Content Act is geared towards ensuring locals benefit from um, the bounty that the oil and gas industry has provided for us. And the definition for one to be a Guyanese require um, 51% beneficial ownership, 90% of your labor force must be Guyanese, and 75% of the senior management must be Guyanese. So again, the Guyanese company is largely run by Guyanese, largely owned by Guyanese, and what we have found is that they have been skirting of those conditionalities, and we have to deploy other mechanisms to further strengthen the intent, that is to ensure that the Guyanese get the benefit. Because you can't say to me that a company is 51% owned by a Guyanese, but then at the end of the year, the Guyanese doesn't get the dividends of the increased procurement opportunities that come to that company. So some of the things we're exploring is whether that person must be a tax resident in Guyana, and ensuring that these added condition layers of strengthening the intent of the act will ensure that we kind of disincentivize these types of behavior. Another thing as well is that we found that, which I think in our implementation of the act, we need to be practical as well, and we need to be mindful of that there might be some areas or some sectors where we don't have the necessary skill sets, and that requires some level of introspection and some level of being honest with yourself that, hey, we might not have the requisite skill sets in these areas, and therefore it might be impractical for us to have these high management requirements.
So if I can get that
Yeah.
clear, let's say you're a foreign company, I'm a local company. We have the ability to, I have the wherewithal to bring my share, my investment.
Yep.
But in order for us to really get this company going and for it to be representative of a Guyanese, by definition of the law, we're struggling to find the people within the
Correct.
market. So there is that component to partner,
Yep.
but getting the people. So that's
Yeah.
where the
So-
flexibility, that's the
So
kind of
that
flexibility you're looking at.
yeah, that is something that we have to explore, because I mean, we need to keep the what is our guiding star. That is to ensure that Guyanese benefit. Now, in ensuring that Guyanese benefit, we need to be real to say that, hey, we have the expertise in these areas, we might not have the expertise in these areas. So I think, which is something that we are considering, is how do we accommodate these types of situations where the Guyanese might not have or we might not be able to find the requisite amount of Guyanese to fill this managerial structure. If we could perhaps create an avenue for waivers in that regard, because we have a waiver mechanism in place, which I find it isn't talked about a lot. That is, while the companies have a requirement to procure in these FART areas this level of procurement activity, if there doesn't exist local capacity, then the companies could be waived from having to comply with this requirement. So equally, I'm thinking that maybe, again, this is something that would be subject to the consideration beyond me, but maybe there can be a mechanism where we could waive the managerial structure, providing that there is justifiable reasons to do so. That is to say, we don't have enough local capacity, we don't have the expertise, and therefore we could bring in expertise which would perhaps work along with Guyanese to allow that knowledge transfer, and maybe within a predefined period, those persons could then take up the leadership mantle in these companies. So those are some of the flexible mechanisms that we could engender to not take away from the overarching goal, which is Guyanese through Guyanese benefiting, but ensuring that we also give ourselves the opportunity to learn and the opportunity to grow without taking away the momentum that we've achieved since the enactment of the act. So those two things, one, looking at how we can strengthen um, the definition in cases where we do have capacity
Mm-hmm.
and where we discourage Guyanese from skirting. Because, I mean, while the act is intended to incentivize Guyanese, we, we can't be oblivious to say that some Guyanese might not necessarily um, subscribe to what we are trying to
Yes.
achieve.
Yes.
And in so doing, they would just act in a manner that isn't consistent with what we're trying to achieve. So I think that is one issue, and the another issue which I think is critical is the access to financing area. You know that
Mm-hmm.
in most areas within the sector is it requires a large capital
Yeah.
injection, and how the industry operates, at least prior to a milestone that we achieved, which I'll mention shortly, is that companies, once they procure a service or good from you, you provide that service. You then now have to prepare your invoice, which there is special rules. Different companies have different requirements as it comes to invoicing.
Mm-hmm.
But once that invoice is accepted, you now have to wait 90 days to receive your payment. Now, as you would appreciate, that 90-day window still requires a company to operate. So you still need working capital to fund to continue your operations. So that in and of itself would have acted as an artificial impediment
Mm-hmm.
to allowing Guyanese companies to participate, one, and two, to allowing them to grow. So what we did, and I must commend Dr. Pratap, who was instrumental in ensuring, and Minister Barrett, who were instrumental in ensuring that we reduce this time, this window from 90 days. It's now down to 30 to 45 days. So that, but in and of itself, gives Guyanese companies more breathing space, so that they no longer have to have their capital out there for 90 days, but they can expect that maybe within 30 to 45 days, they will get back those monies so that they could continue funding their business. So that was something instrumental. And I think also another great initiative is we have the local bank. I think GBTI would have introduced an invoicing financing mechanism
Mm-hmm.
where if you get an invoice from a particular company, you could use, or a contract, if you could use that invoice as a means of collateralizing your business. So you no longer have to, the traditional way in Guyana is that for you to get a loan, you either have to put up a transport or a certificate
Mm-hmm.
of
Mm-hmm.
title. So with the progression of the industry, it also requires us increasing and diversifying the sophistication of how we look at finance and how we finance our businesses. And I think we must commend GBTI.
Hopefully, more banks get
Yeah,
on board with
and
that.
I suspect that more banks will get on board, but also I think it requires as well Guyanese businesses and Guyanese persons to use the banking industry, because I mean a bank would be more amenable to doing this with a customer that has a history with them, that
Mm-hmm.
has a relationship with the bank. So I mean we would encourage Guyanese to use the banking the banks, use the institutions, build a relationship with your local bank, so that when these opportunities come your way, you can credibly go to the bank to say, hey, I have an invoice from, let's say, Exxon. I have an invoice from SBM. I have an invoice from Baker Hughes. This is the terms and condition. This is the payment window. I
Mm-hmm.
need X amount of capital to help me finance this invoice, and that would take us a far way, because I mean it's one thing to provide the opportunities, but it's a next thing to finance these opportunities. So
Mm-hmm.
actually implement and execute it requires a different ecosystem to allow these businesses to thrive. So we have I think this is a step in the right direction. There's still more work to be done. As you said, I'm aware of GBTI, and I would encourage the other banks to look at this to see how we could further support Guyanese businesses, because they need the capital to participate, they need the capital to grow. And I think this is something that the government also overarchingly recognizes. And I think you are aware, and your viewers are aware, that there are plans to establish a development bank.
We've been hearing
Yes,
about that
yes,
over the
yes.
past
And
few months, indeed.
from my vantage point, I am extremely excited about that, because now it provides a different avenue for Guyanese businesses to get access to capital to fund
Yeah.
some of their operations.
That's going to be a
Yeah.
very pivotal launching pad
Yeah.
to gain opportunities and access into the
Yep.
market.
And not only in the
Yeah.
oil and gas industry, but the wider
Indeed.
economy, because with the level of construction and infrastructure work
Yes.
going on, with our plans for agriculture, these are exciting times. And I think this establishment of this bank would also indirectly nudge the local banks, the existing
Yep.
banks, to say, hey, you now have to compete for customers, because if you don't offer the right products, then you would find that your customers would gravitate to institutions that are more amenable to what they're trying to achieve. So I think GBTI took the first step in terms of initiating this invoicing by invoicing financing. I think the government is now saying, okay, all right, we recognize that, and we are now establishing a development bank, which we're geared towards small and medium scale businesses to allow them to grow. And hopefully, I do believe strongly that the other banks will follow suit. If they haven't already followed suit, they will follow suit in short order, so that this issue of access to financing will be one that it would be a story of the past, whereas Guyanese companies could now say, hey, there are the opportunities here. The Local Content Secretariat, we are driving the industry in terms of ensuring that the opportunities are provided, ensuring that the participating companies are aware of these opportunities. And then on the flip side of it, there is the financial sector that is driving and supporting these businesses in executing these jobs, because I think that will provide credence to Guyanese businesses, in that, when these companies go abroad and they're reflecting on the Guyanese experience, you'll say that, hey, we legitimately had concerns that with the enactment of a Local Content Act, it might grind the industry to a halt. But the way Guyana approached this situation, we were actually able to accelerate our activities. And I think in maybe 10 years from now, Guyana will be a model if we keep on the same trajectory. That is providing the opportunities for local to participate. And a point I must make before we close is that the Local Content Act, while it focuses on Guyanese, it is not to say that we are not open for foreign investment.
Right.
What we're saying is that if you're coming to invest in Guyana, we want you to partner with Guyanese. So, for example, in the areas in the first schedule, if there's a foreign investor who wants to maybe participate in transportation, participate in some area, that first, when you're coming to Guyana, think local. Who are the locals engaged in these industries that I can partner with? And let's share that prosperity together. So we need assistance, and that, again, this is another avenue where financing can come. That is that outside of the banking industry, you can partner with international investors and ensure that Guyanese and the investors share in a mutually beneficial way. So there's a win-win on both sides of the story. So I would strongly encourage not Guyanese businesses, to participate, but I don't want the message to go across that we're not open to foreign investment. We value foreign partnerships, and we want to encourage that those persons looking to come to Guyana, even if the areas aren't in the first schedule, try to collaborate. There's the Private Sector Commission, there's the GCCI, there are all these local business support organizations that have a large membership, and their membership are engaged in the different sectors in the economy. So try to reach out, try to leverage the connections in these institutions, and look for partnerships. I think that's the only way you could grow from strength to strength, is where you partner, because on one hand it de-risks the investment. You're no longer solely exposed to the risk that comes with the investment, but it also encourages an infusion of cultures, so a foreign investor might bring a different way of doing a particular thing, and Guyanese might have a different way, and within that partnership you could yield a product that is superior, in the sense that it takes into account an alternative experience. So the Guyana experience is married with an international experience, and we get a truly remarkable end product. So I'm all on board, and I'm happy to say that participate. Guyanese must participate. The oil and gas resources is our natural patrimony, and it's here for the benefit of all of us. We are providing the platform for the companies to participate, and we are also providing the platform for the oil and gas companies to. We're compelling them to say, hey, in these areas, we want you to focus on Guyanese and Guyanese companies. So that is where I see that this story will continue to evolve. Yeah.
Mr. Munroe, I think you have convinced our audience that the Local Content Secretariat, the reins moving from your predecessor, Dr. Martin Pratap, to yourself, it has been moved to very capable hands. So I know that our audience has learned quite a lot about the journey that we've taken.
Yep.
And I know that they will be looking forward to hearing from you again. So
Yeah,
we look forward to having you back on the podcast too.
Most definitely. Guyana, thank you very much for having me. I'm always excited to speak local content. I would have never thought that a day would come where maybe I would have been at the helm of this story. So I'm extremely humbled to have the opportunity to serve at the head of the Local Content Secretariat. I think the work needs to be done, and my clarion call would be to encourage persons to participate. Come in. If you have any inquiries, come in, find out, be engaged. The Local Content Secretariat, we will endeavor to improve on our efficiencies. We will endeavor to be more responsive if needs be. We will endeavor to bring more awareness to this story of local content. I think I must commend you for providing the platform for us to speak more about local content. And I look forward to working with the sector. I look forward to working with Guyanese, and I look forward to also working with the foreign investors who might have an interest to participate in this story.
Thank you so much, Mr. Munroe. To our audience, thank you as well for joining us. This has been an episode of Starting Point, the Oil and Gas Edition. I'll see you next time.
Thanks for watching Starting Point. Follow us on Spotify, YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, and LinkedIn for critical updates and exclusive content.